This is my dear friend, Dr. David Lake. Can we have a hand for him? Now, what I would like to know is how many of you recognize his face? Let me see your hands. Oh, look at that. I'd say about at least a third of them, would you say?
Fame.
Fame, yes. David appeared on our Ultimate Therapist videos, and he came up with a fear of public speaking. And I remember the heart was pounding at a 9 and all of that, and it took us a while to do that. And eventually, if I recall it right, I left you alone on the stage to test things, and you said, I hope you don't come back, or something like that. You remember that? Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, since then, one of your favorite things to do is public speak, I think, is it not? You got your own microphone here.
One of my favourite things to do is do what I do. Public speaking is just a way to do it. Oh. I wouldn't call it a favourite activity.
Oh, you wouldn't?
No.
Well, you're supposed to say that.
Well, it's I'd rather listen to music and hang out with Steve.
All right.
But it's okay. I'm okay about it.
Sure. All right. Now, you specialize in PTSD, in trauma.
I specialise in relationships and trauma.
Yes. But for tonight,
Yeah.
we're going to work on PTSD, trauma.
Well, for a lot of guys and women, it's the same thing.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
You're going to relate a story to us having to do with your daughter.
I am. Yep.
You may do some one-on-one work up here.
I will do some one-on-one.
Okay.
I've had some volunteers, and I've actually selected someone, and they're courageous enough to come up and work on their trauma. So good.
And one thing that's going to be very important here is to customize this to you. Please use the microphones because they're open for comment just about any time, except for maybe the one-on-one work.
Yep.
But otherwise, comments, questions, bring them up. Okay. We'll see you in a bit.
Thank you, Gary. Yes, I encourage you to ask me lots of questions. There's multiple purposes in this. First, you need to keep me awake. I've got the graveyard shift. And second, I'm really appreciating the fact that all of you are so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I mean, it looks good. So I'll try and make it interesting and give you something you can take away and use. I hope that you're getting used to the Australian accent. I'm pretty used to it, but who can understand much of it? Now, Chuck, we had this out the other night, Chuck. All right. As made clear, despite what you might or might not pick up, you will be confused on a higher level. This is a complex subject, PTSD. I think PTSD as a subject, trauma as a subject, is quite dry. The fact is most people understand it very, very well. They understand it personally, they understand it in their life. So in the first part, I'll be talking about my daughter Tanya and her experience in Bali. In the second part, I'll be working with a volunteer. And in the third part, I'll be giving my overview on trauma and what I consider the highlights of treatment. This will conform to your 12-page handout. Who's got the handout? Excellent. I could read out the 12-page handout line by line. Who wants me to do that? One person? Sorry. Yeah. And in that way, I hope to make it alive and interesting for you. Now, in this group, we actually have some workshoppers that Steve and I met in both San Francisco and in Dallas, who met my daughter Tanya as she was travelling around the world and photographing things and having a bit of fun. Who's met Tanya? I can't remember all the people who are in our workshops. A couple? Yeah, very good. She's my daughter. She's 27, my number one daughter. And she's very adventurous. She was travelling around, met up with us, as I said. In Dallas, she was flying to Burma for a bit of an adventure. She's a photojournalist with a national Sydney paper. And when I heard some of those adventures by email, I had to do hours of tapping. I can't begin to tell you how traumatic it was for me to hear about her adventures in Burma. Passing out in the middle of the street, waking up hours later with a Burmese woman fanning her and giving her cold liquids. Things like that, little things like that. Hundreds of miles out into the Burmese interior, fighting off one or two truckers in the middle of the night. Oh, you wouldn't want to know. So when we heard that she was going to Bali for a holiday, we felt quite good about that. My wife and I thought, well, thank God, she'll have a little holiday in the paradise of an island. Who knows where Bali is or been to Bali? Yeah. Beautiful place. The people there are really great people. No sense of time, but what the hell? Who needs it? They have a thing in Bali called ketchak, means rubber time. Someone says, yes, I'll see you soon. That means in an hour, next day, next week, next month. It's very relaxing when you get used to it. I don't think anyone here would like it very much. Gary would hate it. So she's in Bali, she's kicking back, and we found out the hard way with a phone call in the middle of the night that things were not okay. And the phone call went like this, I've been blown up, but I'm okay. Yeah, that's right. I had a friend, his father rang him on the mobile in his car, in the cell phone in the car, and said, I'm in coronary care, but I'm all right. And the son says, yeah, that's where they put all the all right people. So it was one of those calls. And she also rang her boyfriend. His name is James, but we call him Blondie. He's a lovely fella. And so my wife and I and Blondie had this absolute panic attack because she was at pains to tell us that she was okay, but you could tell she was not. He actually organised an aeroplane ticket, but at that time you couldn't really get them. We had a very brief phone call. It was like, I've been in an explosion and I'm okay, but I'll have to ring you back. Everybody else wants to use the phone, like about 50 people. So we get on the internet. It says, explosion in Bali Cafe, 3 presumed dead. Within 2 hours, it was 50 presumed dead and, 80 unaccounted for, things like that. We were very pleased that she was okay talking and able to report this. I mean, that's good. But the not knowing was quite severe. For us, it was about 6 in the morning and I started tapping right away. Steve Wells, my colleague, and his family were actually staying in the house at that time, and we had a lot of plans and they were completely cancelled. Other people came over, friends of one of my other daughters, and it was really good to have them in the house. It was quite reassuring and, they were just normal people having a bit of fun. But our attention was very divided. We were thousands of miles away. My wife and I went out to the airport the next morning, actually. And that was a hell of a scene out at the airport. There was hundreds and hundreds of families all lined up, perfectly quiet. But you could cut the air with a knife because they didn't know the state their relatives would be coming home in. And quite a few people had no news of any kind, and they were going there to find out if they could find out anything at all. So you'd be standing there and someone would come out, all black on crutches and all their hair burned off, and every eye would follow them. And this went on for about 2 hours because the police wanted to interview everybody. So they didn't. The plane had landed, but they weren't coming out. Not good. I hope you're not all tapped out because I'd really like you to do some tapping if any of this resonates with you. Please just don't listen. If some of what I'm saying concerns you, just do some tapping. So we can't see her, and she bounds up behind us, full of vim and vigour, looking fine. She hadn't slept for 2 days. She was completely wired, but she looked great. Well, we stopped crying after about 10 minutes and we got out of the airline terminal. And we're driving home in the most surreal kind of state where normally you'd be talking to someone like that about their travels and what they've done. And she was keen to talk to us, but we weren't so keen I wasn't keen to hear the details. I really wanted to stop the car and do some EFT. But it so happened that she was able to tell us bits and pieces, so that gave me a very good framework, very good construction for the treatment that we eventually did. What actually happened was she went to a bar called Paddy's Irish Bar, and she's sitting in the bar and it was terribly boring, terribly loud music. She hated the music. She moved to a table right down the end of the bar, as far away as she could possibly get from the music of Britney Spears. Do I like Britney Spears these days? I love Britney Spears. Britney Spears rocks. And she was lingering at this table because she hadn't finished her drink, and out of politeness she thought, well, I better stay in here. If she had gone outside, she would have been blown up within 30 seconds. Anyway, the bomb went off and 40 people were killed straight away. She was blown against the wall. She had inhaled all this explosive dust and what have you, and got quite a nasty bruise on her leg and got a bit singed. But she didn't know what had happened. They all thought that maybe a gas heater had blown up. Fair enough. But instead of running out, like a lot of people did, she thought, well, I'll just sit here for a minute. I'll just collect my thoughts. About 20 seconds later, the huge car bomb outside went off. That was the main bomb. And she was separated from that main bomb by the thickest concrete wall in Bali, about that thick. Pretty good going. So these kind of capricious coincidences really resonate when you hear them, because it's just chance, isn't it? In Dallas, her really cheap sandals had fallen off her feet. Her $5 Aussie specials. So we went to this special adventure shop in Dallas and bought her the ultra luxurious Charco sandals. I think they were about $95. I remember because I paid for them. And she had her Charcos on, and when she went outside, she was one of the few people their shoes had not been blown off their feet. So her sandals were actually intact. Everyone else had to wade through all the cut glass and everything and got some really shocking injuries. She told me that as soon as she ran outside, she immediately started tapping. I was very pleased to hear that. I've taught EFT to all my 4 daughters, and they've all used it and they all know it. But very strangely, and other parents in the room might resonate with this, very strangely they often don't want to do it. But when the chips are down, they do want to do it. And I was so pleased that she actually started tapping. So she's tapping on herself as she's trying to escape. And she's basically going through a scene of carnage. She got the hand of this Dutch guy, Danish guy. She caught up with him later, actually found out who he was, and they met up a couple of weeks later in Sydney. They grabbed hold of each other and they didn't let go for 2 hours. They didn't let go for 2 hours. They actually formed a little group of about 6 or 8 people over the next 10 minutes, and they went everywhere together. If one wanted to go to the toilet, all the others would do sentry duty outside the toilet. They went everywhere together for the next 3 or 4 hours. Isn't that great? And she ran out of the Paddy's Irish bar through a scene that I don't think anyone should ever have to witness. It was really shocking, because nearly all the bodies that were killed were out in front of the bar. I saw a photo of this bar a week later, what was left of it. You could not believe that anybody could survive inside this bar. It's like one of those car wrecks where it looks like an accordion, you know, and you think, how could anybody be alive inside that? So at that time, something happened that she regarded as far more dangerous than the explosion. And even in retrospect, she said she was far more scared what happened next than anything that came before. Hundreds of motorbike riders, Balinese, were speeding toward the explosion. And I mean speeding. And people were getting knocked down and hurt. And she's standing in the middle of the road while, 50 or 60 people are flying along in the dark at high speed on motorbikes. That really scared her. And she had a very strange experience where they made it down to the beach not too far away, and people are playing guitars and having massages and drinking juices, and they're saying, boy, you look a bit dirty, you should go and have a wash, things like that. And they could not explain what had happened. Well, they weren't sure what had happened themselves, but it was pretty bad. They did go back to their hotel and they got washed up. The owner of the hotel, in Australia, we would call him a real dickhead. Well, I'm not sure what to say here, but that's what he was. Dickhead works, yeah. He wanted money for them to wash themselves at the tap outside, and he wouldn't let them do it. So they parked him a little distance away. Then she made it out to the airport, and a whole lot of people made it to the airport as well. There were many, many people who didn't make it to the airport. They were in what passes for a hospital in Bali. It was pretty shocking. She told us her whole story in the car, and the next morning she actually went back. She took a camera and she went back and she took a series of photographs that were very helpful to the Australian police in identifying the terrorists who are actually on trial right now, I think, in Australia. They were very, very useful photographs. Nobody else had any great detail in their photographs, and she had a very good camera, so it was very helpful. But that was the time she realised something bad had happened, because she saw a row of body bags that she couldn't see the end of out in the heat on the sidewalk. So the thing started to sink in then. Naturally, at that time, all she wanted to do was come home. Okay, so we're driving, and I was so relieved to see her, I completely forgot that there was going to be a whole lot of work to do. Of course, by this time, when her newspaper found out they actually had an eyewitness account, they were so keen. They had her lined up for 3 media interviews and 1 TV interview. And all of her friends were coming over. She's on the phone, I want to see you, I want to see you. So we got home, and there was a little bit of a lull. I figured we might have about an hour before the roof fell in and all these people came. And I did not want her to tell her story again. I did not want her to go through it again without having had some treatment. So in fact, I said to her, look, I think this is a good time. I want you and Blondie to come up to my little counselling room, and I want to do some EFT with you. And she said, yes, I think that would be a good idea. I had her permission to do it. She was fine with that. I have her permission to tell this story and post my story on Gary's website, so that's okay. It's very, very good if you can treat the problem right away. I think the sooner the better. Once in my practice, I had the opportunity to see a girl who just had a very serious car accident, and she was only 15 minutes before in the car. She was very, very shaky. As luck would have it, we only had time for about a 10-minute tapping session. I thought, well, that's not going to help much. But the next morning, she was practically clear of the traumatic event in terms of emotional resonance. In fact, we did a little bit more work. I just couldn't believe that 10 minutes could do anything, but in fact, it had pretty much cleared 90% of everything. And her number one problem at that time was the fact that it was so inconvenient, and now she's going to have a mountain of paperwork. So I have had other experiences of EFT immediately, and it's highly effective. Highly, highly effective. The sooner the better. You don't even have to know what you're doing. Untrained people could just be tapping away or teaching other people how to do it. I'm sure it would have an excellent effect. So we had about an hour, and we went up there and we had a very simple session. I'm a great believer in keeping things as simple as possible. As simple as possible. We used modification of Gary's favourite tell the story technique. I more or less said to her, I would just like you to tell me what happened. And anytime you feel intense or upset, just let me know and we'll do a whole lot of tapping. Very rapidly that changed into, let's just keep on tapping. Let's not stop at all. Let's just keep going. You can tap here on your little finger, or here on your comprehensive wrist point, or here on your collarbone, or here on your cheek. You can just tap anywhere you like whenever you're talking to me. And I got Blondie to do the same. So here we have the perfect situation. We have someone who's okay about doing it. They feel secure and safe. They know the person. There's no great need to go into the toxic or tricky detail of it. They've got a simple technique they're familiar with. They're going to do it very persistently and continually. And now they have an opportunity to do debriefing, but in a very different way. This is not your standard debriefing. It's really that you want to catch all the emotional resonance and harmonise it, balance it out. And that's what we did. I thought she would, I asked her how she felt in her body, but she said, well, we started on her chest. She felt very tight in her chest, but within a couple of simple sequences, she felt like a spider was gripping her chest, and this was an evil terrorism spider. And that was the metaphor. We used that metaphor quite a bit. We never did resolve that metaphor because the belief underlying it is, how can anybody do this kind of thing and hope to advance a cause that kills innocent people? I don't know the answer to that, but it's a very popular question these days, don't you think? Very popular question in this country and elsewhere. She's searching for the meaning for that. I haven't tried to influence her. This was part of the second session that we had, that we talked a bit more about the why and the how of it. But we did a whole lot of tapping on her physical discomforts, her, not really a sense of unfairness, but it was just a shock to her. You know, she's a beautiful person, and she just could not accommodate in her mind and being and values the fact that somebody would actually wake up in the morning and wanting to kill other people. She just couldn't get there. The fact that I could get there disturbed me a little bit. But anyway, I'm only human. We did about 3/4 of an hour's continual tapping, talking around the event, going right through the event, checking on all the things that disturbed her, like the motorbikes and the attitude of the people. That was really number one for her. The attitude of some of the Balinese, she found she couldn't get her mind around it. You know, they weren't caring, they weren't nice, they were mean, they were. So you can see what this means to her as a person. You can see the roots in her beliefs and values. I didn't instruct Blondie at all. He had a very little knowledge of EFT. I just said to him, you tap along, I trust you to pick this up. He's a very quick learner, and he got it. He was fine with it. Fine with it. He was getting enormous relief. He was sighing and relaxing and going up and down. And he, of course, had probably the worst part of it for him. He had hours and hours and hours of not really knowing if she was okay, properly okay. And then he had to organise the flight, and that was really uphill. I don't even know how he did it, because you couldn't get seats. And he was just so relieved to see her in one piece, but he didn't realise how much tension he had. And he was, I think, almost completely clear of that tension at the end of that hour-long period. All right, so then you can hear all the friends coming, and where's Tanya? And she'll be down in a minute. I thought, all right, that's a good start. So she's, no, we're not sleepy now. We're going to go out scuba diving. We're going, no, not, what's the name, snorkeling. We're going to go surfing. We're going to go to a barbecue. We don't know what we're going to do, but we're not going to go to sleep. We're not tired. I was exhausted, but she's not tired. By the time, that night she went to bed. At that stage she'd been up for nearly 3 days. She slept for about 18 hours straight, but that's all she needed. She's got a pretty good constitution. During that session, I went backwards and forwards with my favourite kind of EFT technique. When you're focusing, you focus initially on what's most important, what resonates most for the person. But here I'm talking about the mind or the body. In the mind, it's the thoughts, associations, memories, recollections, what have you. In the body, it's the feelings, it's the where things are happening, where the tension might be. Scan your body, how does it feel? Checking out the midline, you know, the throat, chest, stomach, head. You can go backwards and forwards here, I think, indefinitely. It's highly productive. It seems to switch systems and switch effectiveness quite easily. In other words, you can be tapping along with all the thoughts, and you can, in a naturalistic way, you can run out of steam. There seems to be a pause or a lack of material or whatever. And that's a natural kind of break in the person's stream of consciousness. But very typically at that time, the body's revving up. One system quietens down, the next one takes over. EFT is a body technique. So that's where I like to work if I can. It can look like a very verbal technique, but the results are in the body. Once worked with a man who had a very serious car accident. He was so upset, he didn't really want to tell what had happened. But he had a lot of body tension, so we worked on that. And we spent the whole hour pretty much on his stomach and chest. And by the time he came back for a second session, like the other person I mentioned, he was about 90% clear. He could actually go through the whole story and very little of it concerned or upset him. Good questions to ask when you're working. I'm keeping this very, very simple. I think that's the best thing. If you run out of steam in the body, is there any thought that goes with that feeling? Is there any feeling that goes with that thought? These are just extremely useful basic questions. But of course, one session isn't going to do it. Gary talks about persistence. It's really another way of being very thorough. So being thorough means never assuming that because you've had a good result that you've done everything. I really like to test and test and test, check and check and check. So after she'd woken up and had her sleep, I forgot to mention, of course, in the middle, she's done her 3 interviews with the media and told her friends the story, half a dozen times. That was okay. The interviews were fine. None of that interview or storytelling upset her in the slightest, which I think is quite significant, because it was still upsetting me. I tapped along with her the whole time doing this. I hope you realise I always do that. I think everyone should. At this time, it's really on the news in a big way, and some very heart-rending interviews are occurring. People can't find their relatives, and like 9/11, a whole lot of people were eventually identified through DNA. I remember one interview where a tourist nurse with very simple training took it upon himself to actually try and identify all the bodies and help the parents who were flying into Bali. And he just dropped in his tracks after about 24 hours. He just couldn't do it anymore. And he gave an interview to a reporter, but then he talked to the camera. He said, Mum and Dad, we did everything that we could with what we had. I thought, man, I'm not going to watch any more TV at this stage, and I didn't. That was the end of my TV watching. It's so upsetting. So, the night time comes, and I'm thinking, good, time for another session. And in a very naturalistic way, she's just chatting in the lounge room. And I sat down, and Blondie was there. I said, let's have a bit more, let's do a bit more. But this time we just started tapping on points. We didn't do any sequences or setups, and I really kind of, in a gentle way, I interviewed her. I said, well, how is it now? What do you think? How's it going? And she was very thoughtful about it, and we got right into the, if you like, the philosophy of it and how people can be like this. In the middle of it, Blondie came up with a spontaneous memory of someone who tried to kill him when he was 16 by holding a knife to his throat. So we took a little sidetrack and did about 10, 15 minutes with him very successfully. And that session actually went on for well over an hour because we just did a whole lot of continual tapping. I'll call it a session, but to me it was a mopping up. My sense of it was she was about 90% okay. I didn't expect her to be 100% okay. Why would anyone be 100% okay after what had happened? How can that possibly be? So she had a very legitimate sense of sadness, and she didn't have any anger. There was no one to be angry with. It was a mystery. It's just a huge explosion. That's all the treatment that she had for that incident. I checked in with her quite a bit without bugging her, without bothering her. I did it about once a week. She was fine. In fact, she had a reunion with all her work friends, and I went to it. They just could not believe that she was alive, because by this time all the stories are really hitting home in Australia. They just followed her every movement at this picnic we had, like someone who'd come back from the dead, like, the chosen one. And they were so happy for her, but I think they were quite traumatised by watching all the TV. Is that a familiar theme in this country? Oh man. I think once is enough. So, That was interesting. She was in far better shape than they were, if I had to make a summary. I understand that there are some American lawyers doing a lawsuit against people in Saudi Arabia for financing, whatever. And they've actually asked everybody involved in Australia if they want to be part of the lawsuit. Tanya doesn't want anything to do with it. I don't blame her. In fact, I'd have to tell you now, she's recovered so well that she's considering doing a cycling trip through Central Asia and Iran and maybe Iraq. I just bought some flashing lights from Margie. Where's Margie? Yeah, I bought 2 of Margie's blue flashing lights that she can put on her bike, because blue is a colour you don't see in nature. It's very, very noticeable. Thank you for that, Margie. That's the best I can do. That's all I can do. I don't think she needs any more treatment for this, and I think she's struggling to find the meaning of what happened. I think a lot of people are struggling to find the meaning of what happened. A lot of people in Australia were very traumatised by 9/11. It was 24-hour-a-day cover, and actually Steve and I were in San Francisco not too long after, wasn't it? The next year, I'm sorry, exactly, the next year on September the 11th, it was again 24-hour cover. And I have very strong opinions about what that does to a lot of ordinary people who don't need to have this stuff come into their inner world and contaminate it. Very strong feelings. But we live in a media-driven society. These points that I've written up are basically my template for treating trauma in a previously well person who does not have previous, if you like, psychopathology or multiple incident trauma. And it works fine. It couldn't be simpler. This is the kind of protocol that adapts itself so well to group situations and to people who are unsophisticated and have no knowledge of anything complex or psychology or anything like that. I would even go further and say that if you just do the stimulation of the meridian system alone while you're willing to debrief the story to a sympathetic or caring person, someone you trust, then you'll get very good results. The sooner, the better. My hope is that one day this applies to all workers in emergency services and all people that deal with this kinds of crisis and strife. I really think it would be wonderful. I'm sure we all feel the same way about EFT, the potential for it. But we seem to be a long way from that. So who's got some questions about the incident itself or any of the simple treatment or the results or anything that I've said so far? Please use the 3 mics.
Is this on? Would it be helpful to tap on something like, even though I can't make sense of the idiocy of this, even though I can't find an answer of why this would happen, would something like that help your daughter?
Yes, of course it would in theory, but we did do a little bit of that. That's a very authentic, very legitimate feeling.
Yeah.
That confusion is, I think it's meant to be there.
Yeah.
EFT is not going to work on something that's real and true in a negative sense for the person that is not toxic or dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's part of the legitimate negative force of the event.
Yeah. So as long as it's not taking them into dysfunction or toxicity, it's okay.
Well, I think it's got to be part of every event that we don't understand. I mean, look at Steve and I went to Dallas and had a look at where Kennedy was assassinated. It's still a mystery, isn't it? Yeah. It's very strange. Yeah. We don't understand everything about it.
Yeah. Well, I was very much with you because on 9/11 I was on the East Coast, and my daughter was in the air from the East Coast to the West Coast, so I didn't know so I had to handle the same thing.
Yeah, the not knowing is very potent, isn't it?
Yeah, and I didn't know for 3.5 or 4 hours.
Yes.
And
I think that kicked a lot of people into a space they hadn't been in for a long, long time.
Yeah.
It certainly did me, yeah.
So I teach stress management, so I used EFT and all my stress management tools.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that. One thing I didn't say was I had to make a decision whether I should treat Tanya myself or whether I should call on Steve Wells to help me out. And I felt okay about it. I wasn't 100% okay, but knowing her so well, I thought this will work out. It isn't really an intimate or a personal event for her. It's something that came in from the outside, and we could deal with it as a group. My other daughters, other three daughters, a couple of them did a little bit of tapping, especially when they watched the TV, but I think the combination of having Tanya back home and knowing that the other was a long way away somehow got them, they were okay about it. But I can't say that for sure because I haven't really asked them in depth. Question? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, my question has to do with, well, I'll use the word guilt. I've worked with
Guilt.
lots of trauma victims, I guess I'll call them that. And even beyond people I've worked with, it's so common for the people who didn't die to have those feelings of why me, and then to feel bad about it. I have a feeling your daughter is probably so well adjusted it might not have been there for her, but I'm curious as to whether you needed to work with that element for her, the fact that she survived when so many others did not.
That did not come up at all for her, not a bit. In fact, very quickly she was really enjoying life again. And I thought that was a great response myself. You know, she said in her interview with the paper that she doesn't want to live her life hiding under a rock. She doesn't want to let this change her life. I think that's pretty appropriate.
Yeah, very highly.
And there's something about that guilt that means now you shouldn't enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
Like at funerals, you should be sad. Boy, some of the funerals I've been to, I'd like to go back, you know. Deborah.
I have a similar experience, and I really want to reinforce your experience. After 9/11, I worked at the Pentagon and then on Wall Street for a number of weeks.
Yep.
I'm a critical incident stress debriefer, and I have to follow a very specific
Oh, yeah.
a
I've read your
protocol.
excellent post on Gary's list.
Yes, well, thank you. But there's a specific protocol. It's a 7-step protocol. It takes about 2 to 3 hours.
Yes.
And according to my contracts with at least one of the crisis management companies that sent me to Wall Street and also to the Pentagon, it specifically says in the contract, don't try any of these more innovative techniques. Just do this 7-step protocol. Well, I could see that it was helping, but I also saw people getting more and more riled up about other things. So I said, well, we're going to go through this process, but there's a little relaxation technique I'd like you to know about. So while you're talking, just do what I'm doing.
Sneaky, sneaky.
And for 2 hours, 3 hours, this is all we did.
You're a legend.
And people just felt so much better. But they told their story, and I followed my contract. I never said, even though. Not once.
Thank God you stuck to the letter of the law.
Oh. Well, that's something I should tap for.
I think you did well. Yeah. All right. Other comments, free associations? No. In the third part of this talk, I'm going to, as I said, give my overview about trauma, but the more I work with trauma, the more simply I like to work. It's so tempting to think that it's got to be complex and multi-level and what have you, and it is. But I need a simple method so I can focus on that person, so I can do the relational work, which I think is the most important part. You need to have a tremendously good rapport and connection and safe, secure place to do this kind of work. And if you haven't got that, don't do it. So that also requires a lot of grounding and centeredness in the therapist. You're going to hear stuff you don't want to hear. That's why you tap along. I remember the bad old days when I didn't know some of these modern techniques, and I did not look forward to working with people with these kind of troubles. Did not look forward to it, for good reason. 2 or 3 of them in the day, you'd be absolutely wiped out. And having used EMDR for many years, I did 1 and 2 level with Francine Shapiro. I'll just do my Francine Shapiro imitation. She's really great. I've never met too many guys who stand like that, but she really showed them how to do it. It's good stuff. EMDR works. It's fantastic. That's the first time I started having really good results. But it was tiring. It was a very bumpy ride for me, very bumpy ride for the client. And for that reason, I really prefer EFT. I'm not down on EMDR. I think it's absolutely wonderful. And she's got some excellent protocols, which I'll mention briefly a bit later on. In brief, her model of accelerated information processing by using rapid eye movement is wonderful. The fact that meridian stimulation will do this more gently and naturally and easily, I think, is the saving grace. Isn't it marvellous to think that something is so simple and easy to use and actually kind of idiot-proof? You can hardly put a foot wrong. All the elegance of it is finding the right lever, finding the right place, finding the right belief system. And that comes with experience. But isn't it marvellous to think that such a simple technique, and it really is simple, especially the way Gary has put it out, can have such huge results? Why don't people know this? What is wrong with the... God, if you discovered an anti-gravity machine, you'd never hear the end of it. Why is it that meridian stimulation isn't really spreading through my profession or any other profession very rapidly? I think it's going to come through the back door, through the people. Rahana.
Hi, Dave. I just wanted to share with you, you already know about the accident that I had.
Please do. This is a great story. Thank you.
On March the 11th, a truck ran into my car, and you might have read about it on Gary's post. And so I was able to tap immediately and just run the movie in my mind, and it was so immediate. And I was able to drive the next day without any upsets of any sort. But what I want to share with you is what I didn't put on Gary's site was my friend was visiting from LA, and we were having a discussion about angels. He's a Christian, I'm a non-Christian, and so we were debating. Are there angels? Are they guardians? Do they come in long white dresses with, so I was actually making light of it. And the accident happened like about half an hour after. Did I get my answer or what?
You got it.
And it's a great technique anyway. And thank you, Gary, for bringing it out to us.
Yeah, I think Gary's, yeah. Thank you. What's your first name?
John.
Thank you, John.
A couple of years ago, I was a deputy sheriff with Arapahoe County, Colorado. I was involved in a shooting incident where one of the individuals who was shot at was my partner.
Right.
Law enforcement is not open to a lot of alternates,
Yeah.
and the agency isn't either. So 15 minutes after the incident occurred, the individual who was shot at was sitting in his unit, and with nobody looking, I tapped him out of it, and he didn't know what was going on. You just don't bring that up.
Do you want to tap a little bit while you're telling us?
I tried that over there. It wasn't doing something.
Won't do any harm.
Yeah, but it's the first time I told anybody about this.
Yeah.
You don't bring it up in law enforcement.
No. Although they really need it, don't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just tap on your cheek a little bit. So you saved him months of suffering.
Well, I think must have, because I read his report that he wrote within 20 minutes of that.
Yeah.
And it was the clearest, most concise, and accurate report I've ever read.
You cured his learning difficulty as well.
Well, he was an ex-Marine.
Ex-Marine.
Right, so he used 3-letter words.
Thank you, John.
I have a question for you.
Yep, question?
This relates to his story. In my hometown, there was a horrible auto accident where some decapitations occurred. And I work in the hospital in OB, but I know the emergency personnel. And what happened when they arrived by helicopter at the scene was that the emergency room physician got out of the chopper, looked at the scene, and promptly threw up. So I knew he was not available to be his best at that point. So I said, wow, this is where EFT would be very helpful. If he knew that, he could have tapped himself down and been much more available to the victims, along with the other emergency personnel. So I went to the chief of police, who I know quite well. I went to the city manager. I went to the ER nurses and doctors and tried to get this in and have drawn sounds like maybe we should do that. And I've gotten nowhere. Do you have any suggestions?
I'd be kidding if I said yes. I've tried the same thing.
Yeah.
Look, most pioneers have been run out of town and tarred and feathered. I mean, I don't fancy that. I really think it's going to come through the people.
Okay.
Keep trying.
And I am teaching the townspeople and clients
Go ahead.
and so on. So,
That becomes like an overwhelming pressure eventually.
okay.
And then group pressure will do the job, in my opinion.
Okay, thanks.
My hair used to be brown before I started working in emergency room, and after the birth of my fourth daughter, it went shocking white and never changed. So I wish I'd known EFT then. Okay, I make it 20 past 12. Oh, one more. Make it a quickie.
Yes, it is quick.
Hey?
I'm,
All right, I'm on Sydney time.
I'm training myself to do the tapping for the victims, wherever the victim shows up on TV. So I tap for them whether they like it or not. I don't know if it helps them, but it certainly is something that I can do,
Yes,
and it serves me. And it's my intention that it serve them.
I think that's a very good intention. Thank you. All right, it's 20 past. We meet back in here at 25 before. Is that how you say it in America? Well, we're going to have a session of working with a volunteer for trauma. We have Ree, who has volunteered. Thank you.
Emma, word.
Say testing 1, 2, 3.
Testing one,
No,
two, three.
just normally.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Now, during this kind of work, I'd really appreciate it if you didn't talk at all. You can laugh, you can cry, you can move around a little bit, but not walk, please. It's very distracting. So no talking, no chatting till after. We'll have plenty of time for questions and what have you. I'd like you very much to do some tapping if you wish. Say that to everybody. I think it's very important, actually. So do we have our contract? Everybody say yes? Yes. Good. How do you feel?
Tight.
So we had a bit of a, just tap here for a minute. We had a bit of a chat in the lobby for about 10 minutes, didn't we? Yeah. You were telling me the details of what happened, but we didn't go right into it. Why don't you pretend I know nothing about this and tell me what you'd like to work on?
I guess
Just let me borrow your hand for a minute. Off you go.
the first thing I want to say is,
Just to me.
Cindy, this one's for you too.
Yeah. Cindy is your daughter.
So, I have a number of daughters and some sons, and I have 3 by natural birth. And my youngest was diagnosed at age 37 with CML.
Chronic myeloid leukemia.
And the oldest daughter was a natural perfect match. So she got a bone marrow transplant.
She was the match for her sister.
Right.
Wow.
Perfect match. 7. Related match, and they call it. And when the diagnosis came in, Cindy called me and asked if I would her caretaker in the hospital.
Look after her.
There's so much, the nurses are so overtaxed, the doctors are so overworked that they'll use almost any live, warm body. So I told her that I would. And that took 2.5 months. And then I flew back and forth from Florida to Virginia every time she was in the
Just tap on your little finger point with your thumb. Yeah, just rest your hand on your lap.
hospital for over 24 hours.
Yep. Keep tapping.
And she thought, and I thought she was going to make it.
But you didn't.
No, 3 years
Were you there?
was the struggle. And
Were you there at the end?
I can hear you.
Were you there at the end?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yes.
So when you just said a minute ago, this one's for you, what did you mean?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, it's my Aussie accent. When you said, this one's for you, when you sat down,
Well, she was very, very bright.
Yep.
And she could follow her process. All the tubes and the IVs, she could track 18 lines
wow.
and tell a nurse when they had made an error. And eventually she couldn't do that. She couldn't fight any longer.
Yep, got tired.
It's like losing your degrees.
Mm. How's that feeling in your chest?
It's through you right now.
Okay, you focus on that. Just focus on that. I'm going to do what Gary does. You wait there.
And I
Keep talking.
heard, I mean, I'm trained, I know, I couldn't fool myself. And when she went from going to get well to going out of here, I heard it.
In what way?
I heard the change in her
Yep.
sentences. I heard the focus change. And I kept saying, please, God, don't let this be what I think it is.
But it was.
But it was. I knew, I think before she knew. You know, Mom, will you? The nurse wanted to wash her, shampoo her hair, and she said, Mom, will you do it? And it was like, please, God, don't let this be what I think it is, and it was.
It was, yeah.
It's the tiny little things that I'm trained to listen for.
Did you know and she didn't know?
Yes,
Yeah.
I had to tell her.
They were keeping it from her?
Anybody doesn't, oh God, they don't know about processing death, or most don't. So my role changed from what a caretaker's, has to be positive, has to be up, has to be
Leukemia is not a very up disease.
No.
It must have been a bit of
He
a strain.
just transitioned out of here.
Well,
Death is
for
not
some
the
people.
easiest thing to deal with.
Was it like part of you died as well?
Oh, Jesus, Lord. We've been so close. And after I told her how seriously ill she was,
Yep.
she went under, and when she came up, she said, I feel like I just woke up.
Ah, woke up to the truth.
And she went under the anesthesia again, and when she came up the next time, she said, things are moving so fast.
Mm.
I mean, from the moment I told her, she just couldn't, she...
Keep breathing. It's not fair, is it? You're supposed to die first. Keep breathing.
We were supposed to do this together.
You were going to go with her? Really? Die together? Serious?
Beat the cancer.
Oh, but am I right too? What?
And before anybody could almost catch their breath, 9/11 happened, and it was like all these people. She got buried under all these people.
She got lost.
9/11 was so huge,
Just tap on your little finger point. Little
so
finger point
unbelievable. It's like
with your thumb.
they jumped and they fell
Like
on
this.
her too.
Like that. So everyone else is crying and what, you're not allowed to? Or you're not allowed to cry, but everybody else is crying?
Oh yeah, I cried, but it was it's like it was just so overwhelming.
Yeah.
How do you cry for 3,000 people?
Who would you have preferred to cry for?
And so I attempted to stay with her, you know, what I was dealing with, and, you know, I was dealing with all of it, really. If I could have gone to New York, if I could have gone to Washington, that would have helped, and I wasn't physically able. I wasn't able. I couldn't have done any more.
I think Gary gets these wholesale. Gary gets these for wholesale. You can have more than one.
One for each hand.
Are you hearing my voice okay?
Sometimes.
Okay, do you have a bit of a hearing problem?
Well, with all this moisture in my head, my tubes, the ear tubes close and open.
Oh yeah, okay.
I'm hearing you now. I'm hearing me now.
All right. You feeling hot?
That I'm feeling, I guess, is I'm okay.
I was talking to you a minute ago and I made a mistake. I was talking to you and I made a mistake. I thought you said that you wanted to die with her. But I'm wondering if I made a mistake.
I did want to go with her, and no, you didn't make a mistake. I knew that I wanted to go with her. and recognized signs in me that were bothering me, that I was still wanting to go out of here.
Is that something you wanted to do before, like
Well, I wanted
before
to
she
be
got
with
sick?
her again,
Of course, yeah.
and
Do you think of her, do you speak to her now?
I,
Do you speak to her now? Do you speak to Cindy?
I'm sorry, I'm just not able to hear.
Do you speak to Cindy now, your daughter?
Do
Do you speak to her?
I haven't in a long time, not until tonight, what I said.
Yeah.
I had not spoken to her since the memorial service. And
What did you say at the service?
I spoke at the service, and that's when the grief and the joy merged. And I didn't know whether I could speak or not. And when the time came, and the audience was asked, does somebody want to say something? I heard Cindy say to me, "Okay, Ree," she normally called me Mom. But when I got ready to stand up, I heard her say, "Okay, Ree, how are you going to handle this one?" And in that moment, I knew.
You could do it.
And as I spoke about her life, and her transition, the joy and the sadness merged. I'm not able to get that to happen. Yeah. And there was another gestalt, and there was joy beyond all imagination. I wanted to laugh and jump and skip. And the townspeople would have thought I was out of my mind if I had done what I felt like doing.
They probably think that already.
They may have. The doctors kind of looked a little strange when I said some things to them.
And you're in the helping profession, you told me.
God, my head, Jesus.
What's happening?
Let's see. I had heard about tapping. I had heard about Callahan about the time of the diagnosis, and a colleague from New York had introduced me to it, but I didn't have time to go off and study that. And so I didn't have tapping at that time to help. What a journey.
Where did the journey begin for you?
When did the journey begin?
For
sorry,
you.
David,
That's okay. When did the journey begin for you? The helping journey.
Well, at that moment I was thinking about her cancer.
Sure.
I guess the journey began for me when the first fetus moved. It's my hunch.
The first...
Fetus moved.
Oh, yeah. So you're going to... What was your role in your mind for your children? How did you see yourself?
Well, I was to teach them how to make it in the world.
Yeah. And how did you go? Did you do that? No. Okay.